Well, this is 3 West 51st Street. Shall we start introducing the general area, which is that this is the home of the Lambs. It's been the home of the Lambs for 50 years. It started off in the basement and moved to the 5th floor. It was originally where the Lambs restaurant is. The Lambs restaurant became a hotel. It became a landmark, but behind it is a big hotel, the Chat Wall. So when people go to the Lambs restaurant, they go to the Lambs Club. What a great name for that restaurant. And they will be seeing the Stanford white facade of the original building. It's actually built for the Lambs. It's something like the Players Club, having its history with the Booth family. This group has the history with the Charles and Mary Lamb from London. You familiar with that writer at all? He wrote Elia. He was kind of a commentator of the times, and his sister, and they lived together. They opened up their homes, and that salon came to the United States in 1874 with Montague, an actor who thought it would be fun to continue that tradition after they had passed away. So the Lambs founded here. It's the first theatrical club in the United States, and it has a long history. It's part of the United States history is part of what the Lambs are. So good. Magda, how are we doing? Am I?
You can start.
And we're starting to get into this meeting of two minds here. For those of you who are familiar with the writing of Foster Hirsch, you know about the overview, the informed enhancement of the history of cinema in putting it in social context of how the country has evolved and how it's expressed in film, and in particular certain highlighting different Austin Pendleton is here. I was just thinking of you, Austin. I guess we can jump right.
Sorry, I got lost.
Well, you made it. It was hard in terms of a scene.
Isn't that Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare?
Yes, they did.
Yes, as a
Charles
child.
Murray, yes.
I was given that book.
Yeah. So, Austin, have a seat over there, because I was just thinking of you with, well, for one thing, I mentioned the Booth story, because the history of the Lambs somewhat overlapped with the history of different clubs. There's the Friars Club. I don't know how that. Anyway, the Otto
Can I have a
Preminger.
microphone?
Do we have another microphone? We might be sharing. Foster's, because I don't know if we have a second. Yeah. All right. Well, the particular reason here is that both Austin and Crystal attended the Lincoln Center program together. They're close friends for.
It was called the Lincoln Center Training Program.
The Lincoln Center Training Program.
And Austin has written a play that's opening tomorrow called Orson's Shadow.
Oh yeah, what a nice time.
And he's a wonderful writer.
Yay! Guess where it's going to be?
At Theater for the New City.
One of the founders of the theater is right here today. And the other overlap, just at Otto Preminger, is major overview. He's got, Foster Hirsch's book on Otto. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
He gave me a great interview for the book. Skidoo.
Oh, all right, so we're all set.
We can't forget that.
So we have them all here. I guess without further ado, Crystal, I don't know what to say. I work directly with her because she's writing. She's more productive than ever. I guess Austin wants to set that example too, being more. So the work is continuing up to the present day, and it's such an honor to be introducing Crystal tonight with, and thank you Magda Katz for making this possible, and of course the Lambs.
And Peter DeSouza is a composer.
Here I am.
Wonderful composer.
Yay! Well, I'm hosting, come to the Lambs. We're hosts of a song salon. It's Susan Horwitz, Dr.
This is
Sue.
my co-host. We
And,
co-host the Songwriters
But
Salon.
with that, let me open up the floor to this exciting conflagration of
Okay,
people. Welcome.
I'll start by asking our guests some questions, and I'm sure Austin will fill in as we go along, and we'll then open it to the house. But I do want to give Crystal a proper introduction. We are sitting here tonight. She wouldn't like to be described this way, but I'm going to do it anyway. We're sitting here tonight in the presence of an honest to goodness theatrical legend.
Yeah.
This person was one of the co-founders of Theater for the New City in 1971.
Yeah.
And it was dedicated, as we'll discuss, to a certain kind of repertory, a certain kind of theatrical experience. It's moved a few times. 1971, this is 2024. Crystal Field is still the executive director of this legendary off-Broadway company. That is some kind of theatrical record. She's still at the job full-time, giving opportunities to young people and further than young people, older than young people, looking for a chance in the theater. It's hard to make a break, to get into the theater. Crystal has always given the opportunities to people when somehow many other doors are closed. So let me start by asking you, way back 1971, you were the Judson Poets Theater. You and your colleagues from Judson Poets decided to leave Judson Poets and start Theater for the New City. What was your original intention for this theater?
Well, first of all, Judson was the mother and father of myriad poets and playwrights and actors, and it was really the proving ground and the birth of creativity in New York City. That was the Judson Poets Theater, started by Bob Nichols at the Judson Church. And so we all gravitated to that place because that was the birth of new work. We did a show called Dracula Sabbat. It had a cast of about 25.
Those were the
And
days.
they were all naked halfway through the show. I have pictures, including me. Now, it's interesting because and we were reviewed by the New York Times. And the New York Times said about me that I was chubby and that eventually he knew I was going to get naked, and eventually I did. That was his whole review of me, anyway. However, it was a great success and a really interesting piece of work. And we had done many other pieces of theater at Judson, but this one had in it George Bartenieff, Larry Kornfeld directed it, and Theo Barnes and myself. I played Lucy, and we knew that we wanted to have a theater of our own, and the people at Judson encouraged us to do so. So we didn't leave Judson, and as a matter of fact, after that, we performed many times at Judson, but we wanted to start a theater. So there was a woman whose name I don't remember, who was the head of a foundation whose name I don't remember, but a very important foundation, and I think it still exists today. And they had their hands on a building on Bank Street, part of Westbeth. It was one of the buildings of Westbeth. 2 stories, empty. Al Jolson had performed there many years ago. It had fallen on, emptiness. And there it was. And they said, okay, you want to have a theater and you have this amazing hit. We'll give you this building, but you got to make a theater out of it. That was the deal. So we talked to each other and we said, we're going to do it. And that's what we did. We took Dracula Sabbat and we performed it in that building.
But then
Oh.
two of your original founders, two of the four, left after the
They
first year.
left because after a year, we had a 2-year agreement to be there for 2 years, rent-free. After a year, they tried to rent the building behind our backs and tell us to go. So George and I said, no, we're not going anywhere, we have a lease. But Theo and Larry said, we're artists. Artists don't get involved in anything. Of course, they were wrong because artists get involved in everything. But that's what happened. So they quit because of that.
So you and George
So
were left
George
in
and
charge.
I
Yes.
slept at the theater because we were afraid they would try to remove us or lock the doors. We slept at the theater and we said, we're not going anywhere. And they acquiesced. They had to because we had a lease. So for another year and a half, we did a ton of stuff, including Charles Ludlam and many, many wonderful performers, and plays and musicals. And we had 2 floors of theater and at the end of 2 years, of course, we had to go. So we took the piano with us, because it was our piano. We moved it down the street. Ronald Tavel told me that there was this building on Jane Street that they had been using but weren't going to anymore, his theater. Why don't I try and get it? So I went to talk to them. Jane West was the name of the building. It was a home for homeless men over 45. And in those days, now we're talking 1972, homeless men over 45 died like flies. There were people dying on the back steps of that building all the time. There was vomit on the back. But they took us in at a very, very low rent. And we had a 5-year lease. We had our own entrance down the street, so nobody saw what was happening in the back. In the back was the library, what had been a library. It had been a Swedish officer's hotel. Beautiful building.
But when you got to it, it had fallen on very hard times.
When we got to it, it was disaster. So listen, you can, if you get 20 people together, it's amazing what they can do. You can refurbish a place. You can actually have a relationship to the actual building of the building if you get enough people at one time to work on something. So that's the sort of thing we did.
But your success at that theater really was instrumental in revitalizing the neighborhood.
Yes.
Now it's a very chic neighborhood and it's a very fancy hotel.
Yes. When we first moved in there, I said, hello out there, and there was no answer. On one side, there were warehouses totally empty, and on the other side, there was this building, and then nothing, and then there were the trucks. You know what the trucks were? Places where homosexuals could make love, okay, without being bothered. I mean, it was, to be a homosexual at that time was about the most terrible and terrifying thing for a person. You look out your window, I once saw a guy in drag walking down the street and a policeman was walking the other way and the guy just walked backwards to get the hell out of there. I mean, we were there during the whole thing with, you know, what's the name of the club?
Stonewall.
Stonewall. I mean,
But Crystal, when you were devising your theater, did you have a program in mind? Did you have certain kinds of plays and writers that you were drawn to? Were you a certain kind of theater, or were you open to all kinds of plays and writers?
we were open to all kinds of new work. New work. My father was a poet. He was a published poet, as a matter of fact.
What was his
2
name?
books. What?
What was his name?
Frederick Field. That was his name. And he was published, and he was a very radical guy.
But
You know.
is it fair to say that Theater for the New City, from the beginning, had a leftist orientation politically? Or is that a mischaracterization?
No, you could say that, but I mean, if you consider, I talk about homosexuality because that was the time when homosexuals finally began to have some political, clout. So if you are doing plays by openly gay writers on openly gay themes, are you left-wing?
You're making a political statement at that
Right, well, you
time.
want to call that left-wing? We were left-wing. If you want, we had plays by women writers, that's another thing. I mean, things that we take for granted now were fought for tooth and nail. Women's rights, I mean, if you want to call that left-wing, it's left-wing, Depends what you mean by left-wing.
But was there an activist edge to your work?
We had an activist edge,
You
yes.
did. That's accurate to say.
We were looking for plays that had a social meaning of some kind. Now, it didn't have to be any particular social meaning, but plays that had social significance, yes.
And revealed their times in some way.
That's right,
That's
very
that's
much
accurate.
so.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's accurate. Then, moving the story along, you moved to the Lower East Side after Jane West, and you've been there ever since, in
Yes.
2 places.
Jane, we started the Halloween parade. Ralph Lee worked as my chief designer for the street theater for 5 years, and came to me at the end of about 5 years and said, Crystal, I've got all these 6-foot, puppets in my apartment, and I have they're not doing anything. And why don't you have a parade of some kind? And I'll put my puppets in, and you can choose some other people to be in the parade, and I said, that's a wonderful idea. And I ran with it, and the first year, we had a brass band that started the parade, and we had all kinds of different groups in the parade, and we made our way through the West Village. That's what we did. We got all the local block association people to come out. That was how we had, some kind of overseeing safety, for the safety of the people in the parade. And we went from Jane Street down to Westbeth, and then through all the streets in the West Village, and ended up in Washington Square Park. We had witches on the arch, and that's how. And its second year, it won an Obie, and it also made the front page of the New York Post. I mean, the front page of the paper, not the section of the paper. So then, then I got a call saying, we want to have a meeting, and we're going to run this by committee. It's getting too big. It's going to run by committee. So I said, well, you could run it by committee as long as I have artistic say. And they said, oh, no, you can't have artistic say because it's going to be run by committee. So I said, bye-bye. Because I had had experiences with losing artistic control over something, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So that's how we said goodbye to the parade, and then right at that time we moved anyway. We moved to 2nd Avenue because we lost our lease, because the whole neighborhood had changed. What had been empty warehouses were now apartments and, you know, co-ops. I mean,
Chic boutique hotels and fancy
Yeah.
coffee houses.
they got rid of the trucks and they got rid of us.
But then you were a pioneer on the Lower East Side, because that
Well,
was
then
another
we-
sort of underserved community.
Yes, we found that there was a building on 2nd Avenue between 10th and 11th Street that I had performed in many years before. The Cricket and the Gate. The Gate was upstairs, the Cricket was downstairs. 2 beautiful theaters, and I performed in the Cricket, so I knew the building. And they gave us 5 years at the rent of $1,250 a month. That's $1,250 a month for rent. They gave us a 5-year lease, and it was owned by a mafioso who was in jail at the time, and those 2 theaters had been a porno movie house and a key club where there was a murder. So they were only, and then the police closed it for a year. And that's when we came on the scene. So they were happy to give it to us cheap, but only for a certain amount of time. After 5 years, it went to $8,000 a month,
Whoa.
which we could not afford.
And that's when you got into the building where you are to this day.
Right.
On First Avenue.
Yes.
It was a field built by Fiorello LaGuardia.
Yes, it
It
was.
was the First Avenue retail market to
Yes.
get the peddlers off the street.
Yes, exactly, to give a home to the peddlers on the street.
So it's
Yes.
a wonderful place for your experimental
Yes.
downtown theater. And
Yeah.
there are still 4 theaters. Over the years, Crystal's Theater has produced over 800 new plays.
New work.
Over 800. No other theatrical organization has done as much. 800. And you're still there. Now, I want to ask you, and maybe people can already get the answer, but you've been in charge of the theater company for all these decades. What qualities are needed to be a good and long-lasting theater executive? What are Crystal's special qualities that would explain this long run?
Psoriasis. You know, I had psoriasis for many years. And you have to have a lot of patience with psoriasis, because you have to find out what is causing it. And you don't know. Anyway, it came finally into what I can eat and what I can't eat. So I don't do well with wheat, you know, and I can have oats and all kinds of other things, but wheat I have to stay away from. It took years to find. Anyway, that's what you need to run a place. You have to have the patience of a saint. You have to deal with people you hate. But you have to deal with them. And you have to welcome them sometimes. And sometimes you start out hating them, and after a while you don't hate them anymore. And then after a while you begin to love them. It depends. You have to be open to new ideas and to new people and to new feelings, and that's really what you have to do. And you can't worry about how much sleep you get. I couldn't start a theater now. But this theater, what happens is after a number of years, it almost runs itself. Not really, but sort of, you know? You know who's gonna come up to you and tell you, they're quitting. You know who's gonna be there even though they have some dread disease, they're gonna come to work anyway. You already know, and you've read so many plays. You know how to, the head of La Mama, she used to be able to open the cover, smell the play, and she'd tell you if it was any good. And she was usually right.
That's Ellen Stewart. Now, do you do more than that when a new play is presented to you?
I do more than that. Let me tell you can size up someone in 5 minutes.
But can you size up a play quickly?
Well, no, you really have to read it.
You have to read it. Okay.
I admit it.
Yeah, you admit it.
But you can read the first 10 pages, and you can see if it's worth reading more.
But
You could do that.
But you are, after all these years, a very astute judge of a new play, I would
Well,
assume.
you become good at it,
You become good at it.
I-
You become good at it.
Like you are, you're famous.
No, not.
I never met you, but I know your name. I know your
Well, I'm a
name.
good writer, but I don't do what you do. That's a different
Well,
category altogether.
It's different, but I'm just
It's
saying.
different. Yeah, you
you
get
know.
good at what you do if you keep at it long enough.
If you keep at it, and you keep at it the right way, with an open heart and an open mind, you get good. You get good at it.
Now, have you acted in shows at Theater for the New City?
I have.
A lot over the years?
Not a lot.
Not a
no.
lot.
As a matter of fact, I only perform in the street theater now, in the summertime, and I usually give myself a very small part. But yeah.
Tell us about that wonderful summer street theater
Yeah, well,
program. It's a musical.
We do a new musical every year, which I write. It's the only thing that I write. I write the book and the lyrics, and this year Peter DeZosa did the music. Wonderful. He's somewhere in the
Yeah, hi, I'm
room.
here. Thank you, Crystal.
Okay. The audiences love it. We get big audiences. We go to all 5 boroughs in the city, and we perform in parks and playgrounds and closed off streets. And we get big audiences, and it's always very political, and it's very current, and audiences love it.
And you also are host to some theatrical organizations that don't have a theater of their own.
Yes.
The most famous is Bread and Puppet, probably the longest lived experimental theater company in America. Is that true, Lily?
63 years.
63 years of Bread and Puppet, and many of those years in performance at Theater for the New City every December.
I don't remember how many years, but for quite some time.
Yes. One of the great theater companies. Now,
Indeed.
I knew Peter
Schumann.
Schumann, the head, and he's still the head, and he's still out there breaking his ass, for his company. But I knew him many years ago. We performed the street theater we were the first thing the public theater did. We were the first production. We did it outside in front of the public theater, but we were supported by the public theater for one of our shows, and we were the first to. And he saw the show. He loved the theater, and so I got to know him many years ago. So, I mean, he's one of the great American artists, Peter Schumann, yeah.
And you're host to him every year still?
We hosted Bread and Puppet Theater, very large company, yeah. Many young people in the company, all different ages, just like our street theater company is very diverse. We have young kids too this year, who one was 16, the other was 10. And then we have many 20s, 30s, 60s, 70s.
And do you still have your arts and education program?
Yes, we do.
Tell us about that.
Well, we have an arts and education program that's free to kids 8 to 10 from the area. It's a small program. There are only 25 kids, and we have 4 teachers, wonderful theater artists who perform during the year and direct shows during the year, and then do the after school. It's an after school program. It meets Monday and Wednesday from 3:30 to 5, and the teachers meet separately, to get ready and as a post.
So this is part of, would you even call it community outreach?
Yeah. it
Because
is-
you're very strong about
Yes.
community outreach and the civic purpose of theater.
Yes, we do. We believe that you really did your homework. It's wonderful. Because you know a lot about it. We feel that theater's a civic necessity. That's what we feel. And we go with that.
And you serve communities that often aren't exposed a lot to
That's-
theater.
That's right. When a lot of places we go in the summer are what they call underserved neighborhoods, some of whom have a large amount of people who don't speak English. They speak very little English or none. And that's only some of the areas. And we go to areas that where people don't have a chance to see live theater. It's amazing. They see TV, they have their phones, but
But they don't know live theater.
No,
They
they
don't know
don't
that
know.
experience.
no, and to them it's like an incredible eye opener, and like all of a sudden, is like a starving person gets some real food. It's wonderful to see.
Now, one of your plays, A Buried Child, Sam Shepard, went on to the Theatre de Lys and then won a Pulitzer Prize. The first time ever an off-Broadway play won the Pulitzer. Did you know when that came to you that it was something you had to produce and you were lucky to get it?
Well, Buried Child, written by
Sam Shepard.
Sam. I knew Sam when I was an actor, and he was an actor, and we were never in the same show, but we'd be on the same bill. So we'd be together in the dressing room, and I got to know him, and so he did a show at the Public Theater where an actor, I believe, urinated as part of the show.
Well, that was the Curse of the Starving.
And he got terrible reviews. But actually, it was a wonderful, what was the name of it?
I think it was the Curse of the Starving.
Yeah, Curse of the
Curse of the
Starving
Starving Child.
Class.
Class.
Yeah.
Class.
Yes.
It was a wonderful play, I saw it. But I caught him at a very good time. Namely, he just gotten lousy reviews for a show. So I wrote him a letter and I said, Sam, listen, why don't you give us your next play? And he wrote back, okay, sure, I got one.
And it was Buried
And it was
Child,
Buried Child. And that's how I got Buried Child.
which was a great,
Yeah.
it's a great play.
Yeah, and we
It's a
did a
great
wonderful
play.
production of it.
Wow.
And he came to the production, he loved it. And then they said, look, could you try to get a producer for this play because we'd like it to move. You see, in those days, there were Broadway producers. I don't think there are anymore.
They're committees.
They, I don't know what they are. Yeah, committees. I don't know, but you can't do that anymore. But in those days, there were literally this person, and we invited them all to come and see it, you see, and one of them bit, you know, and they wanted me to, you know, let them have free rein. I had an agreement with Sam, and we said, no, you're gonna take everything the way it is. They wanted to change the designers. No, you want this play, you're gonna take it with the designers, all the actors. They even we had taken some lights from the lobby to use in the play. They took those too, and they took everything, even the stage managers. We said, you gotta, Ruth was, I don't remember her last name, but we said, you gotta take her too. And they did. And that was one of the reasons that it was such a successful production, because it wasn't watered down in any
It was
way.
authentic.
Yeah.
It was an authentic East Village production that moved to the West Village, but it felt so authentic when I saw it at the Theatre de Lys.
Yeah,
It was
at
very
the
powerful.
Delise.
Yes.
I saw it, yeah.
Before we ask questions from the audience, and I want to ask Austin to chime in here, I do want to move away from Theater for the New City for a moment, because Crystal has an extraordinary credit that some of you may not know. She was a member of the original company of the Lincoln Center Theater under the direction of Harold Klorman, Elia Kazan, and Robert Whitehead. Not too shabby. And she appeared in After the Fall by Arthur Miller, in The Changeling, a Jacobean drama, the only classical theater piece directed by Kazan, didn't get good reviews, and Marco Millions, and then you did some choreography for The Changeling.
For The Changeling, I did, but it started out wonderfully, but he cut it down.
Kazan?
Yeah. I did the whole piece at a rehearsal and got applause from the cast. But then, you know, he said, well, it's too long. He told me to cut it. And I tried to cut it, but you know what? It didn't warrant cutting. So I said, I don't see any way to. He said, okay, well then I'll cut it. And he did. He cut it shorter, then he cut it shorter, then he cut it shorter. And then he never cut it out, but he cut it very short.
But you had worked with Kazan in Splendor in the Grass.
Yeah.
He was your
well,
director,
oh,
so you
Kazan.
knew him.
Kazan was a great director, but Jacobean drama was not for him, okay? You know,
He tried.
yeah, he shouldn't have tried. He should have brought back some of the plays that he had directed before, you know, that had been so very popular, and he could have done that.
And
As-
Tennessee Williams play.
Yes,
something
yes.
Where he did understand the material.
Oh, he was a master,
Yes.
master. You know, you can't take a tap dancer and make a ballet dancer out of him. You can't do that unless you want to give him 4 years of ballet training. So, okay, so he could have slowly worked his way, you know.
But Jacobean drama was too wide a reach at that time for him. And he gave up after that. I don't think he directed for the theater after that. What did you think of After the Fall?
Oh, I
Arthur
thought it
Miller.
was brilliant.
Me too.
I loved it, and Jason Robards.
Mhm.
And eventually, I started out in that play playing a lady with a parrot. And they had wonderful stage managers. I mean, those stage managers were like mother and father to the cast. So they gave me a parrot, you know, and a couple of, in rehearsal, looking at the parrot and kissing the parrot, you know. And then they took the parrot away. And they said, no, you gotta do it to the air, you know, but we gave you the parrot so you know what it's like. So just, and that's what I ended up doing. So, but then the young woman, Zora Lampert, wonderful, brilliant actress.
Brilliant, yeah.
But couldn't, you know, we used to rehearse in the day and perform at night and rehearse the next day and perform at night. And she couldn't do all that. So she gave up her wonderful part in After the Fall because she had one of the leading roles in Marco Millions. And I took over that part. And that I had a wonderful time doing.
In After the Fall.
Yeah, in After the Fall. Yeah, and in order to do it, I had to go, because Ann told me you go to Jason's apartment in the Dakota and say hello to him, because he's got to okay you. So I did. I said hello, and we talked for a minute, and he told them she's fine, she'll be fine.
Now, was Kazan a good director of that material?
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. A teacher, good teacher too. A wonderful, wonderful director. But I mean, first of all, that play, that Jacobean play, is a minor writer, you know? It wasn't Shakespeare. I think he would have done better if he'd picked a Shakespearean play. But he didn't want to, I guess, do one that everyone knew, you know, I don't know. But he picked a second-rate writer. It's a second-rate play. And he was a second-rate director.
And then Jose Quintero directed Marco Millions.
Yes, and Jose was another wonderful director. Wonderful. A different kind of direction, but wonderful director.
And Zora Lampert stayed with that one.
And Zora Lampert stayed, and she did the lead in that play.
Yep.
Yeah. No,
Wonderful actress. She's still with us.
I haven't seen her in many years. I don't know. I really don't know.
She is.
Once I began Theater for the New City, I kind of lost everyone. Because now I can go in at 2 in the afternoon and stay till 8 or 10 at night. But in those days, you know, you started at 9 in the morning and you finished at 9 in the morning the next day. I mean, you didn't sleep.
But you put in a 5-day week every week?
Put in a 7-day week.
As we
Oh,
speak.
now. Now I do 7 days, 6 days, 7 days, 6 days.
You're there all the time.
Yeah. But not from morning to night. It's because I can't do it anymore. I could go from 2 in the afternoon till 8 or 10 at night. That's not a problem, you know. But I can't do what I used to do. And I don't have to. There are a lot of other people working at the theater, Emily Pizzella and Mark Marcanti, wonderful, brilliant. You know, he's, I don't know what position to say, and Alex Barteniev, and Brianna Barteniev, and Jonathan Weber, wonderful general manager. And I mean, there's people now, you know. In the old days, it was me and a bunch of eccentrics. Me and a bunch of eccentrics. I had someone working for me when we had the Jane West Hotel, and for some reason she climbed up and she fell through an awning that was up there. She didn't get hurt, but I don't know why she did that. You know, there were a lot of people like that.
And they gravitate to theater for the new
Gravitated and did a lot of work. We had we had a magician come once who did, and he left his he had a mouse in a hat, a real mouse, and he left his hat high up on something, and we had a cat, and the cat got up there and destroyed the mouse. You know, it was a crazy time.
But it's still a sort of freewheeling bohemian place, isn't it? Or not as much?
Let's put it this way, it looks like it. It looks like it. We encourage freedom of thought, but, you know, you give us too much trouble, we'll kick you the hell out.
Okay, now we have legend on one side of me, but Austin Pendleton's another theatrical legend. Movies and theater, from Fiddler on the Roof, he never stops working and writing and directing. So tell us about your own relationship with Crystal and Theater for the New City.
Well, I first knew her in the Lincoln Center training program, and she played the lady in the cottage play. You know, I'll never forget what she did with that. I see you don't remember it. Yeah. But that was we were all told it was from September to May, and there were 30 of us, so a whole lot of people had auditions. And then we were told by Bob Whitehead, that very nice producer, who had been a Broadway producer of significance, we were told by him the first day that 15 of us at the end of the 8 months would be picked. So there was a certain competitive air in there. I was just very happy for the training of the free training, so I kind of enjoyed it. And when Kazan made the choices at the end, there were some strange omissions, like Frank Langella. He wouldn't take Frank Langella, and some strange admissions, and I won't name them. But it was a wonderful 8 months. I couldn't wait to get up every morning. So that's how I met Crystal. And we've just kept up ever since.
And you're at the theater now.
Yeah, a play called Orson's Shadow. And it's interesting how that came about.
Which is not the first time it's been done.
No, it was directed 20 years ago in a very successful production directed by David Cromer at the Barrow Street Theater.
Yeah.
Now and it's been done all over the place since then. And but it originated in the small theater at Steppenwolf in Chicago, which is what that was at the time when Cromer was directing in Chicago. And but the way it came about, this play, is that in 1967 I was in the first season of the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, where we in total rep. I mean, you'd play one play in the afternoon, another play at night, and all that. And the triumphant actor of that season was Rene Auberjonois. And then he went on and he came to Broadway in a show with Katharine Hepburn and won a Tony. Then he was in all those wonderful Altman films in the 70s. He was in a lot of them. Then he got a TV series. He played the butler in something. And he got to be very well known for that. When he passed a couple of years ago, all they talked about was that. They said he occasionally did theater. So at the time of all the triumphs in that first season, he was awesome. He was being touted as the American Olivier. So 30 years pass, and I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm doing a movie, and so I got invited over to Judith she has me for breakfast someday when I'm not shooting. And she said the following sentence: in 1960, Orson Welles directed Laurence Olivier in Rhinoceros, and by the time it opened, she said Orson was no longer directing it. Make a play out of it. And I thought, well, I mean, it would have ended right there. I mean, how are you going to write about these people? But I had, some years before, been for 2 weeks with Orson Welles in Catch-22, and we shot down in Mexico. Orson, I have to say, deliberately ruined all his scenes. We would rehearse them, and then we'd go out and we'd sit in the desert in those high chairs, and Orson would hold court, and then we'd come back in to shoot the scene, and Orson would say, in front of everybody, would say, "No, Mike, we can't play this as rehearsed." And Mike would tactfully say, "Yes, but perhaps we give it a shot. I wanted to." So Orson would begin to blow lines. Finally, Mike realized that that was the only way they were going to take. And Orson was, of course, magnificent talent, but comedy was not what you would hire him for. He ruined all those scenes, and therefore that was the reason that the movie was not received as well. I mean, because those scenes were in the screenplay by Buck Henry were the comic high points of the thing. So then I came back there from Mexico, and it's the only time this has ever happened to me. For 2 weeks, I had a headache. But of course, the whole thing about him was he made Citizen Kane, and everything else was new. Well, so I got back to New York. It was the days of the revival houses. I went to see all those other movies, the Magnificent Ambersons and Shakespeare, particularly Chimes at Midnight and so forth. And they're brilliant. In some ways, they're more profound than Citizen Kane. And so I began to feel very guilty. So then when Judith, but then Orson, he had left us by that moment. So she calls me over 30 years later she serves me a breakfast in her apartment. And I know Renee is kind of in the wings, kind of listening. And I thought, well, this is my chance to make it up to Orson. And so the cast of characters contains Orson and Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh and Joan Plowright, and then a wonderful part of a young kind of a stage manager. And the critic, Kenneth, the English critic.
Kenneth Tynan.
Kenneth Tynan. So those are the characters. I had met Vivien Leigh. I was in Oh Dad, Poor Dad, which I had a lot of difficulty with because the character had a stutter and I had a stutter, and I went into acting to not stutter, and so it was an extremely difficult year. So right toward the end of that year, my parents were staying in a wonderful hotel across the street from the Museum of Modern Art called the Dorset Hotel. And one night they were coming to see Oh Dad. And so was some interesting lady, and they each realized they were going to be up on the East Side, so finally they got in a cab. And my mother gave the directions of where Oh Dad was playing, and the woman said, "Miss Leigh would like Mr. Pendleton. She's going to play the part in London next year, and she would love very much." Well, well, my mom had been a professional actress, but then parenthetically, I'll tell you why she quit. She got a flashy part in the play The Children's Hour by Lillian Hellman. There are all these young girls in it. She got one of the flashy. So my father had proposed, and she said, "No, I'm gonna." So she had it was the first big tour of The Children's Hour. They were in rehearsal, and suddenly a whole lot of the producers on the road took the trouble to read the play and realized that contained a compassionate portrait of a lesbian. They canceled it. If that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be sitting here today. So she married my dad. Then after the war, she got involved with this community theater. Trumbull County is the county of Warren, over called Trumbull New Theater, in other words, TNT. But anyway, so the woman in the cab said, "You must come over tomorrow afternoon for tea in the Dorset Hotel with Miss Lee." And so we came, and she was courteous beyond all. First of all, she talked to a long time to my mother, who told her everything I just now have told you, and really paying attention. Now when she had played Blanche in Streetcar in London, and she sort of fell apart with it. I mean, she took to taking to the streets after the show, picking up young men, taking them to cheap hotels and so forth. And she practically had a nervous breakdown. So she finally turned her attention to me, and by this point, I was having a terrible time in the Odette with simply talking. And I really wanted out of it, but I was encouraged to stay in by Jerome Robbins, who it turns out had stuttered in his youth, as it happened. But anyway, so she comes, she turns to me finally and says, and I said, well, I'm appreciative of this, I really am, but I've had the problem that the character has in Odette, and I'm having a terrible time. And she looked at me, and I forget this woman because she had all that trouble with Blanche, and she said, "I know exactly what you mean. I still remember where we were in the room." So I put her in the play, because all this happened when Orson was directing Olivier. Olivier was parting ways with Vivian Leigh. So I put her in the play. And then, of course, Joan Plowright. So when Judith asked me to write the play, I wrote it, and we did it at it began at Small Theater, so, and the critic from the Times came to do a Chicago roundup, Penn Brandley. And he gave he spent almost all the Chicago roundup on that play, and he gave this utterly accurate prediction of how it should always be done, which is it should be with actors the audience does not know, so you're not watching a star play another star. And for that reason, I've turned down about 3 Broadway offers for it. It should be very informal. It should just be people who are rolling up their sleeves.
Is that what we're going to see
That's
downtown? When is it opening?
The first
Tomorrow? It's opening tomorrow?
yeah.
And for how long?
It closes after the matinee on Sunday of December 1st, so we're trying to get people to see it who might want to move it on.
But let me ask Crystal, does the theater still have a cap on admission price?
Yes, we do.
You do?
Yes. It's $20.
See?
That is a bargain in New
Yeah.
York theater.
For Orson Shadow, of course, you're going to charge about $500.
Well, if we're smart, we should ask for money
Yeah,
in the
right.
intermission,
Yeah.
you know?
I'd actually like to do it without an intermission. I haven't proposed that to Mr. Schweitzer yet, the director.
We have, we have on
But
occasion.
after what you've told me, I won't, I'll insist on the intermission, yeah. You know.
Okay, I think we've gone way over time because our guests are so fascinating. But does anybody have a question or two for Crystal before we have to leave? Yes?
Yeah, first of all, Crystal, I have to say how much I appreciate you and what you've done for the community, for the theater, for everything. I mean, absolutely. And second of all, simple question. How did you come up with the name Theater for the New City?
Yes, it's a great name. How did you come up with the name Theater for the New City? Wonderful name. Don't ever change it.
You know, I don't remember, really.
I think I
I
remember.
know we had an argument about it.
My research
Oh,
tells
I
me,
know.
yes, you know.
Larry wanted to call it New City Theater. And so we had a discussion, and one of us, I don't think it was me, said, well, we want to call it Theater for the New City. We were, you know who was running for mayor? Lindsay.
Yeah.
Lindsay was one of the best mayors we ever had, but he had a lot of trouble because he wasn't politically savvy enough to know how to handle, and he had trouble with some of the elements of the city. He could, but he was a wonderful mayor.
But I think he used the phrase "New City,"
He might have.
and I think that was
Because
the inspiration.
I remember that we were inspired by him. That I remember. So maybe it was. I remember he's very connected to our name.
He was a great mayor.
Yeah.
We were gonna have a new city.
Yeah. The good
You
old
said
days.
that. You said that, and then you took the name for your wonderful theater. Another question? Okay, I think we want to acknowledge how special it has been to talk to Crystal. And Magda is recording us, and this will go on the Lambs Club YouTube platform, where over the years, months and years, it will be seen by many hundreds, if not thousands, of people, so that everything this woman has said tonight, which is of historical importance to the history of theater in New York, will be permanently available.
Yay.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Foster
Crystal.
Hirsch.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Austin, for coming by also. Austin Pendleton. Hear more about that. And Crystal, thank you so much for coming too.
Thank you, Peter.
To see you at the Lambs is a great honor, thanks. So we'll see more to come, everybody. There's new material, and street theater is coming next year as well.
Oh, yes.
Current.
God knows. God knows if it's gonna be a next year.
Yeah. Right, it's a very unusual day for us here in the United States.
Oh, that was great.
No.
But we're gonna be okay.
Yeah,
Oh, we
I hope so.
special.
Well, Austin, maybe to hear more about the era of the time.